I see.
Then you have to have some facility to regasify. And you have risks. People are concerned about having this much energy concentrated in one vessel in one place. There has been a proposal to have a gasification station in the middle of Long Island Sound, and there are many people who oppose it on safety grounds.
Wow. Now, I want to shift over to the environmental concerns. You know, we hear that the hysterical statements that the ice caps are melting and that there's a greenhouse effect, and there seems to be a lot of mystery about this. Some people say it exists, it doesn't exist. What's the deal with that?
I can tell you what I know, which is not complete knowledge. No one knows entirely what's going to happen or how this is going to play out. It is clear that the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased dramatically in the last 50 years. It is also clear that the average temperature of the Earth has increased enough to catch the attention of people who worry about climate modification. Those are facts. Now, there are some other facts that need to be put on the table and evaluated, at least weighed in comparison. From 1350 to 1850, we were in what was called a mini ice age. Greenland was actually green before 1350. In fact, the Vikings lived there and farmed, and they loved it until it got too cold and they had to leave. So we have built our industrial revolution, our industrial economies, cited our cities, based on what was probably an unusually cold era.
Okay.
So is the heating up that we are experiencing and going to experience related to that, which might be called a natural cycle, or is it related to something people have done?
Yes.
The environment, the natural system, the system of the Earth produces approximately 200 billion tons a year of carbon dioxide. This comes from natural sources, rot, things that die, people that breathe, manure, all kinds of things like that. And the ecosystem absorbs about 200 billion tons a year. So they're almost in balance. Now, the industrial usage of hydrocarbons produces about 6 billion, roughly 3% of the total. Well, people have argued that that's enough to throw us over, and that it's detrimental, and it ought to be seriously, reduced or controlled or somehow contemplated in our planning. I think one also needs to be cognizant of the fact that there are now 7 billion people on this planet, when there were not too long ago only 1 billion. In fact, take a guess. What year would you think the Earth crossed 1 billion on its way to 7 billion?
Let's say not too long ago. Maybe, let's see, I would say 100 years ago.
Well, okay. I would have thought you would guess 1,000 years ago, because that's what I would have guessed.
Yeah.
Truth is, it was 200 years ago.
200 years ago.
It was only 200 years ago that we had 1 billion people on the Earth. At the time of the Romans, 300 million.
That's it.
1/3 of a billion.
The whole story.
So we've learned to control disease and famine and whatever have you, but we now have many, many more people living on this Earth. And in terms of the industrial economies of the world, there's no going back.
Yes.
We're not going to become hunter-gatherers. We're not going to become farmers.
Right.
Family farmers anymore.
All right.
So coming back again, so how do you address this problem? We have a 3%, let's suppose, a 3% imbalance. We have to be more cautious with the hydrocarbons we use. We have to be cautious about the forests and the jungles that absorb carbon dioxide.
Yes, to preserve them.
We also can look into ways of, the ocean is a source of, a sink for carbon dioxide. We need to think in terms of facilitating the absorption. Coral reefs and things like that come from carbon dioxide. So we need to think in terms of facilitating these kinds of absorptions. The one thing I want to be cautious about is we should not put ourselves in a position of attempting to shut down economic growth on this planet.
Right, I understand that. But if we're at already, if we're 3% out of whack, and now China is coming on and India is coming on, aren't we going to, really be out of whack?
Conceivable. It's conceivable that that can throw us even further out of whack.
All right. Now we're running out of time. These are not renewable sources, but they're sources that we have an abundance of, and could become a supplier. I guess we could really become a supplier of energy rather than a consumer.
Well, when we stop importing 14 million barrels a day,
Okay.
that goes on the open market, which relieves the pressure
All
on
right.
everybody.
But in the big picture, hopefully humanity will be here in 1,000 years from now. So, it's not the huge amount of time, 10 lifetimes. Where are we going after that point? Are we, in your view, should we always look into the future for the, hydrocarbons to burn for our fuel, or is there another technology which you think we're destined to go into?
I tend to think of these hydrocarbons that we've talked about as an intermediate solution.
Okay.
Intermediate in the sense of maybe 100 years,
Mm-hmm.
50 to 100 years. We still have oil. Oil
Right.
is not gone.
Right, right.
And these other sources, and there's coal in Europe and coal in Russia and coal in China.
All right, so I want you to get to them
So-
before we have to close. Where are we going with the,
I would think that we would move toward nuclear.
and you're not worried about the dangers of nuclear, the radiation fallout?
One has to worry. That's what engineers are for.
Okay.
One has to solve those problems.
But there's also equivalent dangers with oil. Oil.
Look, I don't
combustion.
know how you equilibrate. There are risks in all industrial activities. There are some doomsday scenarios associated with nuclear power.
Mhm.
There are some very good solutions, and we have to be certain that we can implement them. The French do it. The French have something over 80% of their electricity coming from nuclear power, as well
Mhm.
do the Japanese.
Yeah.
And they've been doing this for something like 25 years.
Wow. Yeah.
So it can be done. What's important, and what I want to make sure that your viewers understand, is that there is no going back. We are
Yes,
not
yes.
going to become individuals living in the forest cutting trees.
Yes.
There are
Yes.
too many people for that.
Okay. And then the nuclear is cheap, is easy to get, and is infinite supply.
There are technologies. For example, there's something called breeder technology, which expands the use of uranium to almost limitless amounts.
Mm.
By the time that becomes a problem, it's so far into the future that it's difficult for any of us to do much more than hand waving.
Yeah. Dr. Leader, it's really a pleasure having you here on Rabbi Rock.
Thank you very much. It's been my
Shalom and
pleasure.
blessings.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you.